Albert Einstein died. It was April 18th, 1955. He was in Princeton, New Jersey. He died early in the morning. He had an abdominal aortic aneurysm. It burst. He was 76 years old. He had chosen not to have surgery. He said he wanted to go when it was his time. He was ready for it. Dr. Thomas Harvey was on call that morning. He was a pathologist. He worked at Princeton Hospital. His job was to examine bodies. He had to figure out why people died. He was the one who did the autopsy on Einstein. An autopsy is when a doctor looks inside a dead body. They check the organs, they want to find the cause of death. Sometimes they look for diseases. Einstein's will said he wanted to be cremated. He wanted his ashes scattered. He did not want a big fuss. He wanted to avoid becoming a holy site. But there was a misunderstanding, or maybe it was a deliberate choice. Harvey did the autopsy. He confirmed the cause of death. He checked Einstein's other organs. Then he removed Einstein's brain. He also removed his eyeballs. He kept the brain. He did not put it back. He kept it for himself. This was a big deal. It was not normal procedure. Most people have their brains put back. Their bodies are made whole. Then they are buried or cremated. Einstein's family did not know this would happen. His son, Hans Albert Einstein, came to the hospital. He was very upset. He found out his father's brain was gone. He was furious. Harvey had to explain himself. He said he believed the brain should be studied. He thought it held secrets about genius. He thought Einstein's brain was special. It could teach science something important. He wanted to understand what made Einstein so smart. Hans Albert did not agree. He thought it was wrong. He wanted his father's body respected. But Harvey had already done it. Harvey was a doctor. He had a medical license, but he did not have clear permission. Not really. He spoke to Einstein's son. He eventually got a kind of reluctant permission. Hans Albert said Harvey could study the brain, but only if it was for science, and only if the results were published in good journals. He made Harvey promise to be careful. He also said the brain must be treated with respect. It was a conditional permission. It was given after the fact. So Harvey kept the brain. He put it in a jar. It was a jar of formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is a chemical. It preserves things. It stops them from rotting. He took it to his lab. He took pictures of it. He measured it. The brain weighed 1,230 grams. This is a bit less than the average man's brain, but size does not always mean smarts. Harvey was a pathologist. He was not a brain expert. He did not know a lot about neuroscience, but he had the brain of the smartest man in the world. He felt this was very important. He felt a big responsibility. He knew people would want to see it. He knew people would want to study it. But first, he had to prepare it. He cut the brain into many pieces. He cut it into about 240 blocks. Each block was small. They were about 1 cubic centimeter. He put these blocks on slides. These are thin pieces of glass. Doctors look at them under a microscope. He did this work himself. It took him a long time. He hoped other scientists would study these slides. He hoped they would find answers. The initial news was quiet. Einstein's death was a big story, but the brain part was not widely known. Not at first. Harvey kept it close. He felt he was doing something good for science. But he also knew it was controversial. He was stepping outside the usual rules. He had gone against what most families would want. He had broken the trust of a famous person's wishes. He was just a small-town pathologist. And now he had the brain of Albert Einstein. It was a heavy burden, and it was just the beginning of a strange journey. Thomas Harvey believed he did the right thing. He really did. He saw Einstein's brain as a scientific treasure. He thought it'd be wrong to let it be cremated. He thought it had to be studied. This was his main justification. He wanted to understand genius. He wanted to know if Einstein's brain looked different. He thought maybe its structure would explain his smarts. Harvey was not a brain scientist. He knew pathology. He knew how to prepare tissue. He knew how to look at cells. But he was not a neurologist. He was not a neuroscientist. He understood this limitation. So he planned to share the brain. He would send pieces to other experts. They could do the deep research. After he took the brain, he preserved it. He filled it with formaldehyde. Then he photographed it. He took many pictures from different angles. He measured it, then he cut it. He used a special tool called a microtome. He sliced it into hundreds of tiny blocks. He labeled each one. He wanted to know where each piece came from in the brain. He did this very carefully. He put the blocks into jars of celluloid. Celluloid is another preserving agent. It hardens the tissue. It makes it easier to slice even thinner. He made thin slices of these blocks. He put those on slides. These were the microscopic slides for study. Harvey kept all these pieces. He kept them in 2 large glass jars. He put them in his basement. This was his home basement. He worked at Princeton Hospital, but the brain was not at the hospital. This was a private project for him. The initial permission from Einstein's son, Hans Albert, was a problem. It was not a clear, written agreement. It was more of a reluctant acceptance. Hans Albert wanted to avoid a scandal. He probably felt he could not undo what was done. So, he made the best of a bad situation. He trusted Harvey. He asked him to make sure the work was serious. He wanted proper scientific study, not just curiosity. But Harvey was not rushing. He kept the brain. He waited. He hoped to find the right people who would study it, people who would publish their findings. Years passed. The brain stayed in his basement. His colleagues at Princeton Hospital did not like this. They found out he had taken the brain. They thought it was unprofessional. They thought it was unethical. It was not standard practice. He was not allowed to just take organs, especially not from such a famous person. The hospital management was not happy. In 1955, the same year Einstein died, Harvey lost his job. He was fired from Princeton Hospital. Some people say it was because of the brain. He had violated rules, he had acted without proper consent, he had embarrassed the hospital. But Harvey always said it was for other reasons. He said he had disagreements with the hospital over lab procedures. Regardless, he was out of a job. And he still had Einstein's brain. This marked a major shift for Harvey. The brain became his life's work, his obsession even. He felt it was his responsibility. He felt it was his mission to study it, and to make sure it was studied by others. But he was now alone. He had no institutional support, he had no lab, he had no funding. He just had the brain and the ambition. He tried to get studies going. He sent small pieces of the brain to a few researchers. They did some initial work, but nothing major came out. The field of neuroscience was not as advanced then. They did not have the tools we have today. They did not know what to look for, or how to look for it. So the early studies were not very successful. Nothing groundbreaking was published. The brain stayed mostly hidden. Harvey kept it secret from most people. Only a few close friends knew. He told his family about it. His wife, Gloria, found it strange. She did not like it in the basement. It was a constant reminder, a strange presence in their home. The brain was a burden for her. It was a strange secret for their family. Harvey was a quiet man. He was not looking for fame. He was not looking for money. He was a scientist. He genuinely believed in the scientific potential of the brain. But his actions were impulsive. They were not well thought out. They led to a lot of trouble for him. They led to a strange life, a life always connected to the brain of Albert Einstein. It was a secret project, a personal mission, and it would take him on a long, strange journey across America. After losing his job at Princeton, Thomas Harvey's life became very difficult. He still had Einstein's brain. It was still in those jars. He took it with him when he moved. He moved around a lot. He went from Princeton, New Jersey, to Wichita, Kansas, then to Weston, Missouri, then to Lawrence, Kansas. He worked at different labs. Sometimes he was a medical director. Sometimes he did autopsies, but he never settled down. The brain was always with him. The brain was his most prized possession, but it was also a burden. It was a constant reminder of his past. And his failure to publish anything significant, he had promised Hans Albert Einstein. He had promised the scientific community, but he had not delivered. His personal life suffered. His marriage ended. His wife, Gloria, did not like the brain. She found it unsettling. It was a constant presence, a secret that weighed on their lives. She divorced him. Some say the brain was a big part of that. She even threatened to throw the brain away once. But she never did. Harvey remarried. His second wife was named Cora. She also found the brain strange. She called it the brain. She tolerated it. But it was always there, in their home, in their lives. Harvey kept it in a cider box. Then he put it in the trunk of his car. He drove it across the country. He moved it from state to state. He always made sure it was safe. He always made sure it was preserved. Years turned into decades. The 1960s passed. The 1970s passed. Harvey was getting older. The brain was still with him. Very little new research happened. He sent out some slides to a few more scientists, but the results were always small. Nothing big came out. The scientific community mostly forgot about it, or they thought it was just a strange story. A relic. Harvey was a quiet man. He did not talk about it much. He worked his jobs. He lived his life, but in the back of his mind, he knew he had this great treasure. He knew he had to protect it. He knew he had to see its potential fulfilled. In the late 1970s, a journalist named Stephen Levy heard rumors. He heard that Einstein's brain was still out there, and that a doctor named Thomas Harvey had it. As Levy was working for New Jersey Monthly magazine, he decided to find Harvey. It was a long shot, but he looked for him. Levy tracked Harvey down. He found him in Wichita, Kansas. Harvey was working in a lab there. He agreed to meet Levy. Levy asked him about the brain, and Harvey admitted he had it. He showed it to Levy. It was in those jars, in the cider box, in his office. Levy was amazed. He wrote a story about it. The story was published in 1978. It was a huge sensation. The world was shocked. Einstein's brain was not cremated. It was not buried. It was in Kansas, in a pathologist's office. This story brought the brain back into the public eye. Harvey was no longer a secret keeper. He was now known. People started asking questions again. Scientists started asking questions again. They wanted to see the brain. They wanted to study it. But even after the story, Harvey was still careful. He was still protective. He was wary of opportunists. He wanted serious scientists. He wanted real research. He did not want a spectacle. He wanted the brain to reveal its secrets for science. The brain had been with him for over 20 years by then. It had seen many homes, many moves. It had been a part of his life, his unique, solitary life. He had kept his promise to Hans Albert in one way. He had preserved the brain. He had kept it safe. But the other part of the promise, the scientific discovery, was still largely unmet. But now, with the public knowing, new possibilities opened up. The brain's journey was far from over. And Harvey's role in it was about to change again. After Stephen Levy's story in 1978, the world knew. Einstein's brain was real. It was still with Dr. Thomas Harvey. This changed things. Harvey was no longer just a private keeper. He was now a public figure, or at least the person holding a public artifact. Scientists started to contact him. They wanted to study the brain. Technology had improved since 1955. New ways to look at brain cells have been developed. Neuroscientists had better tools. They had better ideas of what to look for. Harvey was now in his 70s. He was living in Lawrence, Kansas. He felt it was time to share. He sent out more pieces of the brain. He sent them to various researchers. These researchers were from different universities. They had different specialties. One of the first big studies came out in 1985. It was done by Marion Diamond. She was a neuroscientist at the University of California, Berkeley. She got 4 small blocks of Einstein's brain. She compared them to brains from 11 other men. These men were around Einstein's age. They had average intelligence. Diamond and her team looked at glial cells. Those glial cells are like support cells in the brain. They are not neurons. Neurons send messages. Glial cells support the neurons. They provide nutrients, they clean up waste, they help neurons work better. The Diamond found that Einstein's brain had more glial cells, especially in one part of the brain. This part was the inferior parietal lobe. This area is important for complex thought. It helps with math. It helps with spatial reasoning. These are things Einstein was very good at. Diamond suggested that maybe more glial cells helped Einstein's neurons work better. This could explain his genius. This was big news. It was the first time anyone published something significant. It seemed to give some evidence for Harvey's initial idea, that Einstein's brain was special. It was different, but not everyone agreed. Other scientists pointed out problems. Diamond only had small pieces of the brain. She only compared it to a small number of other brains. The way she counted the cells was also questioned. Some said it was hard to be truly accurate. They said the results might just be normal variation. Maybe it was not a sign of genius. Maybe it was just how his brain happened to be. More studies followed. In 1996, another study came out. This one focused on neurons. It found that neurons in some parts of Einstein's brain were smaller. They were more densely packed. This was in the frontal lobe. This part of the brain is involved in planning and memory. The idea was that smaller, more packed neurons might mean faster communication. They might work more efficiently. Then, in 1999, another study was published. This one was very detailed. It was done by Sandra Whitelson. She was a neuroscientist at McMaster University in Canada. She looked at the overall structure of Einstein's brain. She had a lot of the original photographs Harvey took in 1955. She compared them to 35 other brains. Whitelson's study found some interesting things. Einstein's brain did not have a parietal operculum. This is a groove or sulcus that usually separates 2 parts of the brain. Its absence meant that other parts of his brain were larger. They were more connected, especially in the parietal lobes. This area is important for visual spatial tasks. It also helps with mathematical thinking. Whitelson suggested this unusual structure might have allowed his brain to process information in a unique way. This study got a lot of attention. It seemed to show a clear physical difference, a difference that could relate to his abilities. But again, there were questions. Was this unique structure a cause of his genius, or was it just a unique feature that had no real impact? And how could you prove it? You cannot do experiments on a dead brain, and there were still only pieces of the brain, not the whole thing, and comparing one brain to a few others is always difficult. There is so much natural variation in human brains, it is hard to say what is truly unique. And what is just different? Still, these studies were important. They showed that Harvey's decision was not completely in vain. They offered some scientific insight, they opened up new questions about brain structure and intelligence, and they kept Einstein's brain a topic of scientific discussion. But the big mystery of genius itself remained. The brain was a puzzle, and scientists were only getting small glimpses of its pieces. And Thomas Harvey lived a long life. He died in 2007, at the age of 95. He had carried the burden and the honor of Einstein's brain for 52 years. Near the end of his life, he decided to give the remaining parts of the brain back to Princeton. He gave them to the University Medical Center, specifically to the pathologist there. That was where the journey had begun. So, where are the pieces of Einstein's brain now? They are mostly at the National Museum of Health and Medicine. This is in Silver Spring, Maryland. They have many of Harvey's original slides. They have some of the brain blocks. They are preserved for future research. And for display, there are also still some small parts in other labs, places where they were sent for study. The scientific impact of keeping the brain is mixed. On one hand, it led to some interesting findings. Marion Diamond's work on glial cells, Sandra Whitelson's work on brain structure. These studies offered clues. They suggested that Einstein's brain did have some unique features. These features that might relate to his incredible abilities. This provided fuel for the idea that genius might have a physical basis in the brain. But on the other hand, the findings were not definitive. They did not fully explain genius. They could not. They were small observations. They were often based on limited comparisons. Many neuroscientists believe that genius is far too complex. It is not just about brain structure. It is about how the brain works. It is about experiences. It is about education. It is about personality. It is about luck. It is about so many things. A brain in a jar cannot tell us all that. The ethical questions remain. Did a doctor steal Einstein's brain? Yes, in a way. Harvey took it without clear, informed consent. He did it without explicit permission from Einstein or his family at the time of death. This was a violation of trust. It was a violation of Einstein's known wishes for cremation. Albert Einstein gave reluctant permission later, but it was under duress. It was after the fact. This raises important questions about medical ethics, about respecting a person's wishes after they die, about the line between scientific curiosity and professional conduct. The human element of the story is also powerful. Dr. Harvey was obsessed. He genuinely believed he was doing good for science. He dedicated his life to this one project. It cost him his job, it cost him his family. He traveled across the country with this strange cargo. He became famous, but in a strange way. He became known as the man who had Einstein's brain. It was a solitary, strange journey for him. Einstein himself probably would have found it all quite amusing, or perhaps a bit annoying. He wanted no fuss. He wanted to be cremated. He did not want to be an object of worship. Or scientific dissection. He likely would have preferred his ideas and theories to live on, not his physical brain. The story of Einstein's brain is a fascinating one. It mixes science, ethics, and human obsession. It reminds us how much we want to understand genius, how much we want to find a simple answer, a physical explanation for something as complex as a brilliant mind. But in the end, what did we learn from the brain? We learned a little bit about its structure, we saw some differences, but the core mystery of how Einstein thought, how he created, how he revolutionized physics, that still mostly remains. It probably lies not just in the cells and folds of his brain, but in the untold story of his mind, his life, and his imagination. The brain was a treasure for Harvey, a scientific curiosity for others, but the true genius of Albert Einstein lives in his equations, his words, and his lasting impact on the world. Not just in a jar of formaldehyde.